What's going on, everybody? Sam Shapiro back here with more of your Heat latest on FanArc. Don't forget to drop a like on this video, and of course, subscribe to our channel for great daily content, all pertaining to your Miami Heat right here, Monday through Friday. Miami building a team around Kawhi Leonard. Could that be possible? Well, now reports from Baxter Holmes, ESPN senior writer, are suggesting that might be a case that Miami could potentially be. Well, he's not exactly directly reporting that Miami could be an interesting team, but one thing he is reporting is that the Clippers are done building around Kawhi Leonard and are being urged to kind of move their agenda away from Kawhi being one of these centerpiece superstars that the Clippers can really build around this season. And quite honestly, given his track record, especially over the last few years, him not consistently taking the floor, whether he's injured or just doesn't really want to play, it seems like, I just think that that's not necessarily the worst direction for this Clippers team to necessarily take. Quite honestly, if Kawhi Leonard retired, I don't think a lot of organizations would ultimately knock him for it, bringing home championships with the Spurs and Raptors throughout his entire career, ultimately being one of the best small forwards in the NBA now for nearly well over a decade. And that's even including the fact that he hasn't been able to take the floor consistently, especially over the last recent seasons. So in that regard, that's kind of why I can't see Miami really wanting to build their team around a guy like Kawhi Leonard, just because I don't really see Pat Riley tolerating a whole lot of funny business regarding Kawhi Leonard's agenda in that regard. But I'd like to also argue, in a perfect world, Kawhi Leonard, if he's able to stay healthy, would be competing night in and night out, could make this Miami team absolutely championship contenders and very scary, especially if we're seeing a team that looked like the championship won in Toronto, where Norman Powell, I believe, was also part of that crew. So it would kind of be interesting to see those two reunite in Miami, and also seeing the organization rather trying to build around this roster of Tyler, Bam, and Khalil, where assuming you wouldn't have to give up those assets to acquire a guy like Kawhi, to really bolster the roster, and especially because of the lack of strength in the forward department, at least for Miami, I think this would, in a perfect world, if he could stay healthy and take the floor consistently, be a great add for Miami if, of course, he was able to, compete at least in closer to 65, 70 games throughout the regular season. So drop in the comments if you think maybe a perfect world scenario, if Miami were to bring on Kawhi Leonard, could potentially come to fruition, because I have a lot of skepticism and maybe even thinking that could be a possibility. And for that reason, I don't ever really see Miami being, willing, or Miami building a team around Kawhi Leonard at this point in time. But it's interesting to see these reports come out, and one of the first ones being, especially from Miami Heat Daily, that should the Heat be interested in trying to maybe build a team around this superstar who, unfortunately, we haven't really seen consistently take the court in the past couple of seasons. But I think in a perfect world, if he could be a great add for Miami, but I don't really see that happening at least anytime soon. But now kind of moving over to another forward that Miami could really, I think, benefit from adding to their roster is Lauri Markkanen. We've kind of talked about, potential trades that could potentially be worth Miami kind of pursuing in the long run. And I think that this trade that was proposed by Dallas Hoops Journal on September 16th is a pretty interesting one, more so than kind of some of the other three-team trades that I had mentioned in the past couple of weeks. This team obviously only involving Miami and the Jazz. Miami would be getting Lauri Markkanen, Georges Niang, and Kyle Filipowski in exchange for Andrew Wiggins, Nikola Jovic, Jaime Jaquez, Terry Rozier, a 2029 first-round pick, and a 2030 first-round pick swap. Now, granted, that is a lot for Miami to kind of cough up just for really Lauri Markkanen and then two kind of rotational guys that honestly probably would not add an extreme amount of depth, at least in the potential starting, potentially being starting players for Miami, at least in the long haul. But adding a guy like Lauri Markkanen to Miami's roster, I definitely think could bolster it. You're also giving up a lot of rotational pieces in this deal, as well as some pretty good draft assets, that the one really sticking out being that 2029 first-round pick. So I don't think Miami would bite on it, honestly, just because of the draft picks involved. But I think if you were just including those players, Miami could potentially look at maybe bolstering some sort of deal along the lines of that. And I know I've kind of talked about potential trades that could land Lauri Markkanen to Miami involving a lot of those players. I think the big thing primarily would be Miami getting Terry Rozier off their plate. If Jaime Jaquez doesn't really develop into the type of forward Miami is hoping to, they also kind of move on as well. And I think in comparison to maybe a Dalton Connect Lakers type of deal, Miami could swing for Wiggins. Lauri Markkanen would definitely be a more talented player that would really bolster the ultimate depth of Miami's roster in the grand scheme of things. And then you'd be getting a really nice quality starting forward in that. It's interesting to think of a roster that would maybe have Norman Powell potentially coming off the bench, which at this point is kind of wild. But I mean, at that point, you could have Harrow start at the 1 and then also kind of move Powell over to the 2. And then you move Markkanen over to the 3 and then have Bam at the 4 and then having Ware, start for Miami at the 5. That's a pretty scary starting 5. Pretty much any team would be going up against. And I feel like Tyler Herro kind of thrives more at the 2 spot. So if you were going to fluctuate it a little bit, then maybe in a perfect world when Yaku Chonas develops into the point guard, Heat fans are really hoping to see, then you have Yaku Chonas at the 1, Herro at the 2, and then a guy like Markkanen at the 3, and then Bam and 4 rounding out your starting 5. Then you kind of have Powell coming off the bench, and that also kind of creates a lot of depth as well. But I also don't think Yaku Chonas is necessarily there at that time. So if you wanted to maximize, I guess, the talent that's on the roster right now, you could kind of have that first starting 5 that I mentioned if you decide to pursue this trade. But you also don't necessarily have as many bench assets coughing up that trade as well, with guys like Jovic, Jaquez, and Wiggins all being a part of that deal as well. So drop in the comments if you think that 2-team trade might be worth an acquisition and trying to acquire, an all-star international forward in Lauri Markkanen to Miami. I don't necessarily know if giving up that many assets would potentially be worth Miami's time, but I definitely thought this was an interesting trade proposal to say the least, in really the grand scheme of things in Miami, trying to bring some sort of star talent over to the 305. I don't think they would be able to potentially build their entire team around Markkanen because I don't think he's more talented at this point than Bam Adebayo at least. So only, again, a very interesting proposal, I think, but I think Miami may be giving up a little too much assets. Maybe should, quite honestly, if they could get away with holding on Wiggins in that deal, that would be an amazing trade, but I really don't think they'd be able to get away with it. If they were able to hang on to Jaquez, then you'd be keeping the domination at least in the front court, which Miami kind of needs right now, and then also kind of adding, some additional assets that could come off the bench. Could be solid for Miami in the long run. So drop in the comments if you think this trade is Miami maybe giving up too much or could potentially help bolster Miami's really depth and add some star power onto, their rotation in the long run, really. And now moving over to another forward that Miami has really been in some sort of conversation involving pursuing, at least over the course of pretty much the majority of this summer. Jonathan Kuminga is now making headlines for still holding out with the Golden State Warriors. And I read an article from All You Can Heat, and it's just interesting because the headline kind of read that Miami at this point is ultimately dodging a bullet from adding a guy like Kuminga on board. It's now being reported from ESPN's Anthony Slater and Ramona Shelburne that Golden State is offering Kuminga a 3-year, $75 million deal with a team option on the final season, and it comes out to over $48 million in guaranteed money over his first 2 years. And right now, it doesn't even seem like Kuminga is biting on that. So I think it's great that Miami is not really in the conversation for this right now. I know there were kind of rumors when he was seen at the University of Miami football game at the beginning of the month, but I think now that it's kind of confirmed that, or at least the beginning of the college football season, but I think now that it's kind of confirmed that Miami is pretty much out of the talks for him, and Kuminga's still holding out despite really getting a whole lot of money for averaging just 15 points a game. This article is pretty spot on by saying Miami dodged a bullet because, one, I don't know how the heck we would have afforded him at this point. And two, I definitely don't see a perfect world where we're paying him upward of 75, 80, maybe even $85 million. And then we're able to keep guys like Tyler Herro and, potentially make a move on another superstar like a Kevin Durant once he hits the free agent market, once he's all said and done with Houston. So granted, I'm very happy that this is kind of the narrative. Miami dodging a bullet and not trying to pursue things with Jonathan Kuminga. I'm kind of curious to see where he's going to end up now because Golden State wanting to offer him a ton of money. He might just end up settling, or he might end up trying to hold out so long that he can't get a deal from anybody and might just settle for something exponentially worse. So we'll just have to wait and see. But I definitely agree with this article in the sense that Miami completely dodged a bullet, not pursuing any deals long term for Jonathan Kuminga. And now bringing up another interesting topic that I kind of saw over the course of this week. Miami it was kind of being reminisced, at least from what I saw on this one Instagram account specifically regarding to the rookie season of Tyler Herro and Kendrick Nunn and what they were able to do. The post coming from Miami Heat Daily as well. It kind of talked about how Tyler Herro and Kendrick Nunn had one of the most exciting rookie duo seasons really in the franchise's history. The stat that kind of spoke to me the most was the only pair of rookie teammates with more points through the team's first 5 games of a season, not including Wilt, or the only pair of rookie teammates with more points through the team's first 5 games of the season rather, were Wilt Chamberlain and Joe Rurlick. That was back in 1969, and these two combined for 194 points through the first 5 games of their rookie seasons. And that stat kind of just really jumped out to me. I mean, nobody was expecting Kendrick Nunn to really come out and bolster Miami's backcourt alongside Tyler Herro when he was, just a young, I want to say young buck, which is funny because he's from Milwaukee, but considering those guys nearly put up 200 points combined in their first 5 games in the 305, kind of just really popped out at me and begged the question, could Miami potentially build a backcourt like Herro and Nunn in the next coming years? Maybe not necessarily with 2 rookie players, but potentially a guy like Yaku Chones, who is a rookie, and a developing guard like Pela Larson over the course of, or maybe even one of these young guys that they're trying to look into in training camp that I had mentioned earlier in the week, potentially bolstering a season like that. A lot of them high range scorers, and I just think that it could definitely be a similar sort of recipe that Miami could have in the works for potentially cooking up for this team's roster. So drop in the comments if you think hopefully that season will come this year, maybe next year, or even the year after. But it's not looking like maybe this upcoming season we're going to have 2 rookies that combine for nearly 200 points in their first 5 games, but who knows? We'll kind of just have to wait and see. And I'm hoping that some of the pieces we have in the backcourt this year can maybe bolster some similar numbers to that, given how young they are and the ceiling for how talented they could potentially be on Miami. So that's going to wrap it up for today's episode of Heat Latest here on FanArc. Don't forget to drop a like once again on this video. And of course, subscribe to our channel for great daily content, all pertaining to your Miami Heat right here, Monday through Friday. Thanks so much for joining us on this wonderful Thursday. I'm Sam Shapiro. Have a great day.